everybody. Mike with BeResQ here, and we're at, is it Haven Park, I think
Haven
is what
Park.
you've named the apiary. I think that's cool. We're at Haven Park Apiary, and we're gonna work on the sun hive first. It's a flow hive. What we're gonna do is a thermal treatment. The way we do that is we insert a thermal board in the front of the flow hive. In fact, we should probably check while we're at it, just to see if this thing will slide into that slot altogether. I may have to go with a different board. Yeah, so we'll have to see if we need to shim it somehow. We'll try and find a clever way to do this. But I don't think it's been done before. I don't think I've seen a thermal treatment on a flow hive yet. So this will be exciting. We'll see what happens.
We might be able to just take the brood box and lift it up and put it underneath.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and disassemble, take the lid off, and set it aside for a moment. We'll pull the inner cover off. Very good. It's got some sediment and stuff on it. We probably won't use the inner cover for a while. The flow frames themselves we're going to lift off.
The best way to do is to take those two side doors off, and then you can use the gap as a handle.
All right. Like so. Set those aside. Pretty neat to look at, isn't it? How they're working in there.
Yeah.
Like a little observation hive. A lot of people say they won't go up in there, but they're drawing wax in different places, so. All right, we'll set this aside for a moment. Just gonna set it on the end. A lot of people don't like to see me set them on the end like that because they can tip over. But even with regular frames, they're usually propylized in enough you can set them down that way, and there's actually less chance of smashing bees that way.
Makes sense.
All right, here's our excluder, and we don't have to remove it entirely, but what we do have to do is get this sensor onto the middle frame, roughly here, so that it can sense the heat on inside the hive. And they provide a small nail and a little holder for it. Somebody's also 3D printed a nice holder for it, but I like to just stick it right on the propolis itself. A little bit simpler, a little bit easier. Now, given that we have this logistics issue with the flow hive size, we might try and set the board directly on the flow hive. It's not going to hurt it, right, if I pry this?
No, as long as the base doesn't move.
As long as the base doesn't move. Okay. Notice there's a couple screws that kind of stand out over here.
That's to hang the shelf on.
Okay, yeah.
That bottom base, the bottom box comes right off the base, but the base has to be leveled two different directions.
Gotcha. That's right, so it can flow when it's time for harvest.
Right.
Okay. All right, so
there's a handle. There's a handle front and back.
Front and back. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Let's go ahead and I'll have you set that board on there just carefully. And we'll just place this right on top. See, it fits down inside, but not perfectly. So, but that's okay. Rarely do things work perfectly in beekeeping, right? All right, so we're going to set that down like so. Boy, that does not give them any room
To come in and out.
to come in and out.
Did you bring the 8 frame?
We can use an 8 frame size for this, but we can't do them at the same time for that. So let's come up with a shim that gives them a little bit of space. And by shim, it could literally be anything, a twig or something, that it would give them a bee space to come in and out. See how they're crowding up already?
Yep.
They're actually crowding up inside there a little bit. So,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
so there we go. Now they can come in and out pretty freely, right?
Yep.
And we still don't want them to come out very freely at first. See, this is a special spacer that comes with it. It's got a room spot for the cable and an opening to reduce how many can come in and out. Now heat rises, of course, and so I think we're probably fine doing it this way, but again, we're making this up as we go a little bit. And a lot of times we even have to put tape, believe it or not, on this to keep a good strong hive like this from pushing that away.
I see.
But we want to trap the heat at first. So, all right, now this one has a super on it. And I'll show you, you can treat it with a super.
Okay.
I'm going to put that back on in just a moment. But for now, let's just tuck this sensor in on the middle of the brood nest. Maybe right about here. There we go. You can actually use the wax and propolis to hold it.
They have already filled the board on this side, on the end.
Yeah.
That was empty 5 days ago.
Yeah. So we've got a flow going on right now. You can see it if you zoom in. That beautiful white wax.
Yes.
That's what they're building just as fast as they can. So they ought to be filling up that flow super pretty soon, if it works as planned. All right. So we'll go ahead and replace this. Keep the queen from going up top. We don't want her in the flow super. We're going to put the super back on.
Oh, upside down.
Yep, upside down. Thank you. We're going to put the super back on, right side up this time.
There we go.
There we go. All right. Now what we have to do is we have to make sure there's adequate airflow. Ventilation is very, very important with this type of treatment. So the spacer, actually the insulator board, actually is offset a little bit. And I'm going to go further in offsetting it just to make sure that there's airflow through this hole to come up to the top.
Okay.
The other thing I'm going to do is you'll notice I'm not using the inner cover at all,
Right.
which has some cinnamon on it, I'm assuming for ants. So we'll put this on for weight, because we do have a little bit of wind this evening, but we're going to set it off to the side a little bit that way as well. So the two goals we have here are to keep it from blowing away and to keep the heat in, but to let there be enough oxygen flow around this. I might even switch it just a little bit because of the design here. That way. Okay, that'll do a better job, I think. All right, so we'll offset this a little bit. It's really, its only job is to keep the
weight, keep it from moving.
weight on it.
Why don't you turn it sideways?
Yeah,
There you go.
we'll go sideways with it. There we are. Keep it from blowing away. Just want to make sure that vent isn't blocked entirely by the flow frames. And yeah, like that. Okay. So that should stay on there reasonably well, I think.
Yep.
I almost
You know, if you put this just regular in the middle,
yeah.
they'll be able to come in from underneath on the ends, on the gable ends.
Yeah. We actually don't want them to, though.
You don't want them to come in?
It'll actually push them out.
You got a rock.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think we just MacGyver this thing and put a rock on it. So why not? Just grab one here. And that way we'll ensure better ventilation. There you go. Yep, perfect. Still offset a little bit for the hive. Good. Now this is the difficult part. Getting this computer programmed correctly to do the treatment.
Okay.
It involves this step right here. You just push and hold it for a few seconds. And notice it's blinking blue.
Okay.
And by the way, this is a pretty neat product. You'll notice I didn't have to use any custom frames or anything like that. I don't mean to turn this into a commercial, but you're going to see the name of this company over and over again. But everything else is just regular flow hive parts, right? We have the board, a sensor, and an entrance reducer. Everything else is normal. So when we hit the button and turn this on, the computer program is going to go blink blue while it's warming up. It's going to switch to blinking green when the treatment is ongoing. And if it gets too hot, which is what everybody's worried about, then it'll turn red and blink. And some people think it's time to turn it off. That's not the case at all. What it means is it stopped heating the board, and that's because it's 1/10 or maybe 2/10 of a degree above the treatment temperature, which is 106 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So the heat and the airflow moving through, you know, it's kind of like a convection oven or something like that, heats it evenly and kills mites under the brood. It also kills small hive beetles and their larvae. And, you know, killing the pests where they breed is the idea behind this. So,
okay, so what happens if you live in an area where, say, instead of being a nice 70 degrees, 75 degrees, it's 85? It still just manages that temperature?
that's correct.
Okay.
That's exactly what this little sensor probe is doing up here, is it's maintaining the heat in this area where most of the brood is.
Okay.
And so while we know we'll kill a few of the brood, we're not really killing the brood, rather the mites that are on the brood, inside the capped brood where they breed. Those larvae are already suspect, and when we kill the mites inside there, later on the bees are going to go tear off the top of that and pull out the dead larva and lay new eggs in there.
And they would have been infected anyway?
They would have been infected anyway.
Okay.
Okay.
Now what I did do after my last inspection, I cleaned the trays on the bottom, so anything they throw down, we'll be able to see in the next couple of days.
Well, yes, that's correct, and you'll have continuous mite drop. Even the bees that are out and about right now coming back in that don't get the full treatment, they still will have the temperature raised high enough to either sterilize the mites or kill them. All right, so the thermal treatment has officially begun. It's gotten up to what we consider treatment temperature. We want to make sure there's plenty of airflow in and out of this thing. So we'll actually move this back. And I'll point out that a really strong colony could actually push this reducer away. So that's why sometimes we tape it on. We also will add tape if there's gaps to keep the heat in. But when we pull it away like this, a few inches like that, it's to let more air flow into the hive. So
Okay.
oxygen is very, very important. So this one is off to the races. It's going to run for another couple of hours. And this one is a little bit further behind. You can see it's still blinking blue. It's probably about 2 to 3 minutes away from getting up to treatment temperature.
And when that happens, we'll pull that reducer away as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Mike. Well, what I'll do is I'll turn on the time lapse, and this should be setting up pretty soon. And we'll come back in 2 hours and take it all apart.
There you go.
Meanwhile. 2 hours later.
Hi everybody, Mike here with BeResQ, continuing the thermal treatment of these flow hives. And one thing that people bring up a lot of times, what happens if the power fails or if it's cut off, if there's a breaker issue or something like that. And one thing I want to mention is that the thermal treatment itself can be effective even if it's not complete, right? It doesn't have to be 100% kill to still be effective. The mites can be sterilized, you know, when they get up to that 103, 104 temperature. And same thing for under the brood. You know, there might be mites that you see surviving for the next 10 to 14 days. You know, if you go in and do a mite wash, you can detect them, but they're not viable anymore because the thermal treatment has sterilized them. So what we might do, since it's getting late tonight, we want to complete the video, we might go ahead and disassemble the hives and let them start making their way back in. If this were just a normal treatment on a normal night, you know, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Just let it finish out and do it later. But, you know, just making this video, we might shorten it up just a little bit. There wasn't a very high mite count on these anyway, since they were just installed this year as new nukes. We really wanted to just kind of document the process with the flow hive for you guys. So anyway, if that sounds like a good plan, that's what we'll do. Sound good?
Good, yep.
All right. So first things first, I'm just going to cut power to these devices. And it's going to start cooling down.
Now will the queen come out?
The queen sometimes will, you know, poke her head out with the crowd and stuff, but...
'Cause I was just looking right here. Is that the queen?
Well, let's take a look. I don't see the queen.
Oh, it's a drone.
Yeah, that big boy right there is
Yeah,
a
it's a
drone.
drone.
So,
Sounds like Rice Krispies.
yeah, they're all just kind of clicking and trying to get in and out, that type of thing. So,
Okay.
pretty neat, right?
Yeah.
All right, so as we disassemble this, bees themselves are just kind of clinging onto one another, much like they do in a swarm or when they cluster. And notice, I'll just kind of point this out, notice that most of the bees are in line with where the heat would come out. Same thing is true over on the side there must be a gap. And they're clinging directly to the thermal board themselves. So the bees don't mind the heat. In fact, it's beneficial to them. Okay. Safety first, right? I'm going to put some gloves on. Bees get really crawly in the dark. And so when we're working bees in the dark, we try and make sure that we're adequately protected. Safety first. See how they're already starting to go back in?
Yep. Amazing.
They're like, oh.
Now, how many bees are there, do you think?
Oh, I don't know, 10, 20,000, who knows. A couple pounds, 3-4 pounds of bees. There's still quite a few inside.
How many do you think is in the whole colony altogether?
A single like that could run 20, 40,000 bees. More as you have more supers. You'll see the beards getting bigger during the summer. Even without a heat treatment, they'll start to beard like that in the summer. So.
Okay, which one do you want to start first?
We'll disassemble this one first. Since they're on the side, we'll... There's daisy chaining. See them chained together?
Yep.
Interesting. Let go, ladies. Alright. Put that down there. Yeah, piling up. Have a chewed up lid there, so should have made up a new one, but I didn't. Now go, ladies.
It's amazing how they just hold on like that.
There you go. it's okay to talk to your bees. I do it all the time. Or if it's not okay, then I'm not okay either. All right.
Ashley keeps on reminding me that they're not pets.
That's true. That's true. They're technically, officially livestock, aren't they? All right, we're just going to kind of set this this way. This way we can direct most of them back into the hive when they start to fall.
Man, they're all fanning, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. All right, I go. Wow. Big old pile of bees. See what I mean by they get crawly?
Yep.
Just want to walk everywhere because it's dark.
And because I'm using the camera, I can't have gloves and they're all over my
Oh! Well, we'll try to be gentle with them. Either way. And get that back on roughly the same way. And we could use a brush, you know, a bee brush, and work them in that way. We could use a smoker, you know, to smoke them in a little bit. But if we're gentle, we can kind of direct them. Remove the sensor. And they'll make their way back in the hive anyway.
Right.
So when I put a lid on, especially when there's a lot of bees around, I like to give it a little bit of a twist.
Right.
Squishes less of them. All right, and let's see here. Let's take our insulation tapes off. And let's see here.
That's hot. I can't grab it.
This is warm. Very hot. Let's do it this way. I gotta take it all the way off, don't I?
Just cockeye it.
I'd like to get a couple of shots of that to kind of show what it looks like there. See that? A few dead bees on there, right?
Right. Is that from the heat or the mites?
That's from probably the age and health of the bees themselves that couldn't hold up to the heat, right? But you see a little bit of wax melt. That's from your wonky comb that hangs down a little too low.
Right.
And then you'll see start rows to develop, and you see some dead mites already on here. Looks like a little salt and pepper shaker.
Oh, yeah.
So those are mites that have already dropped and died. And what we don't see here is small hive beetles, which I don't recall seeing many hive beetles in here when we installed this nuke. So, but we do see that sometimes. When there's hive beetles, this will kill those too. Isn't that interesting how it's kind of making little rows? You can see rows come out.
Yeah.
And the more these boards get used, you know, you clean them and clean them and clean them, but they'll still start to show and have them stick. And see how the bees are already starting to work their way back in. They're fanning and working their way back in.
You want me to put the roof on in the morning?
Oh, we can put it on whenever.
Okay.
Put it on now if you want to. Or we can let them rest while we do this one, you know. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They'll make their way. All right. Here you go, ladies. Your turn.
I'm interested to see how many are still in the flow hive.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, it actually pushed them up higher into the flow hive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's more than there was there earlier.
Yeah.
All right. And
Tilt it up, pull the electrode. I can get the electrode.
you know what? Yeah, let's do that. The front of this or the side? Oh, we lifted it from the sides because we took the...
No, the front and back. See the little blue line? Oh no, you're right. But you grab the big knobs. They'll hold on.
Will that hold on?
Yeah.
All right. Just lift it high enough to slide that out from under there.
Out it comes.
Okay.
Off with the blue tape.
Even this little amount of tape. Of course, you know better than anybody how heat works, so. All right, now,
I
hard
think,
part.
is this unplugged?
Yeah, that one's unplugged. It may have cooled down enough.
I can grab this,
Okay.
but the handle is under there.
Yeah.
It's right here.
That's right. So, that's okay. You know what we can do? We can encourage them and scoop them up, or we can just let it cool down a little bit. Either way. I might be able to get enough of a lift on it without the other stuff anyway. Let's just see.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get under it. Boy, not with the weight of the super.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
they're just going to have to move out of my way is what's going to happen. There you go, girls. In you go. Go on. All right, I'll give it a lift.
Here it comes.
Oh, we're on there pretty straight. A little off.
Ouch, 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 ouch. More moments later. Eventually.
Mike, what do you think the overview of tonight was as far as benefit, and how do you think the bees did?
So the bees tolerated it as per normal. The treatment, I'm sure, was effective. Again, we started with flow hives that hadn't really been documented very well with this process before. The mite counts weren't high as we've tested over the last couple weeks because they're new nukes that have gone in there. But we let the treatment run for about an hour and 45 minutes to the full 2.5 hours. What mites it didn't kill, I'm sure it sterilized in that time. But we'll see a difference in the mite count, and we'll see the behavior, the Varroa sensitive kind of hygienic behavior come out on those queens as well, as they tear down some of the brood that has mites breeding under the capped brood. They'll tear out some of those larvae over the next few days, and you know, it'll look a little bit like popcorn out in front of the hive if you see that in action. But it went pretty well, and by cutting it off a little bit early, we didn't get the full treatment, but we got the full documentation, the video of the process, how the machines work and their intended use. So I'm pretty satisfied with our results tonight.
I think we learned something, and I think by maybe in the meantime taking some measurements and maybe coming up with a couple different jigs to make it work, next time it might be a lot easier.
Yeah, we may even want to use a couple of 8-framers and slide them in there, even though it's a 10-frame unit, just simply because of the design. So
I think they're inside you.
yeah, we got a couple inside the old veil here.
All right, well we'll run away.
All right.
All right, have a great night, and come back to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and like below, and see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.